Okay, we have come to the end of this very difficult Corona semester. We are confused, overwhelmed, too much online education. We've been giving these lectures one after the other in the hope that this has replaced our physical presence in class. But at the end of the day, we do what we can. And in these circumstances, I think that you did a great job. And I'd like to thank you all for that. The lecture today is on Daniel Goldman and emotional intelligence. We have always heard about IQ, intelligence quotient. Every time you apply for a certain university or a certain program, they test your intelligence. People are graded on what they write, on what they logically think, on the path of their cause and effect development of thought, on their critical thinking. And yet, we have always been taught that we should hide our emotions, we should control our passions. Ever since Plato, these two horses had to be controlled, the horses of emotions and the horses of the appetites. When we came with Freud, we discovered that the id is that nasty monster that keeps on sticking its head up and doing mischief, and that we should, put it down. But Daniel Goldman, he's a psychologist and graduate from Harvard University. He's written many books on psychology. I'm not going to go through the biography. You can read it on the PowerPoint slides. But I'm going to talk about his great book, which is Emotional Intelligence. And this is the question that he raises. Why are emotions equally important as our intelligence? And he asks questions. How come that sometimes we have people who are dropouts from universities and they excel in life? They succeed in life, We don't want to give examples, but we know a lot of people who were bad in grades and who were fantastically intelligent and clever in society. On the other hand, we find the traditional nerd or this student who has always high honors, who had a difficult life, probably didn't do well in the job, not in the family, had problems with his wife, couldn't raise kids. So this is where Daniel Goldman comes and focuses on how important are emotions, how much are they balanced, and he raises the issue of EQ or EI, emotional intelligence, in as much weight given to it as our intelligence and logical thinking. Now, the way he, this concept of emotions and feelings has been for a long time discussed in literature. If you read Shakespeare, for instance, you will find that Shakespeare talks about the humors. And it was believed that, the effect of zodiac signs even. Some people are born under fire signs, and it was believed that their temperaments were fiery. If you tell them good morning, they shoot, and they are angry, they have smoke coming out of their ears, the way Dante portrayed them in Purgatory. On the other hand, there are some people who are extremely watery. They belong to the water signs. The moment you say something, they have tears coming down their eyes, they sweat a lot, they go to the toilet a lot. And therefore, their liquids are high. Others are, earth signs and so forth. So it was believed that all of these have an effect on the human temperament, on the human actions, even to the degree that Shakespeare even and other English writers came out with these colorful explanations about the biological effect on temperament. You are green with envy. You're feeling blue, the blues, the golden halo. And these colors became very symbolic with temperaments. Now, until the 20th century, we were not very clear about how much do these affect our biological situation. It is when endocrinologists and people studying hormones and people studying enzymes discovered that eventually, if you are scared, your adrenaline probably is pumping more. And there are certain hormones that are, if you have some people, when they have a drop quiz or they are going to perform on stage, get tongue-tied, or other people get diarrhea, So there is a link between the biology and the psychology. And that should not be disregarded. I remember once I was at one of the hospitals where a neurosurgeon was giving a lecture, and he had a skull, a brain that looked very much like a Christmas tree because he had bulbs on them, and he showed how certain emotions trigger certain areas of the brain, and therefore you get to perform actions according to these stimuli that are given to you through your brain. So, according to Daniel Goldman, the text we are reading is what makes a leader. But before I go to that, it is an article that was written in the Harvard Business Review for basically business people, how to succeed and how to be a leader. But the article is so applicable to all aspects of leadership. And if one wants to really have a strong personality and be a leader, then it is interesting to see what are the components of leadership. If you open the catalog of Haigazian University, it says Haigazian aims at creating and preparing leaders for the future. And since you're graduating all now, it is interesting to see how much of this has been, in fact, done, whether it is in student life or whether it is in activities or whether through clubs. And it is, if we haven't succeeded so far, here is an instant manual of how to become a leader, in whether you are a leader of your goal, of your captain of a football team, or whether you're the leader in your church, or whether you're the leader in your political party. It gives you all these components. However, before we go that, I want to show you what Daniel Goldman said about the emotions, 8 emotions, that are primarily our sort of balance or scale, our barometer of actions. You remember when Freud talked about happiness, he talked about the libido. That was one economic scale he used. Daniel Goldman is using 8. And he said there are 8 emotions, 8 feelings that are found in human beings in different levels, but they could be triggering action and affect very much our logical, rational way of thinking in a very well-studied and plausible way. One of them is anger. I'm going to post also a chart where we see how these emotions are being manifested. There is anger, there is sadness, there is fear, there is enjoyment, there is love, there is surprise, there is disgust, and there is shame. Now, according to Daniel Goldman, these actions, these passions, have their manifestations in different ways. For example, anger, he has fury, outrage, resentment, exasperation, indignation, vexation. All of these are part of the family of anger. But what happens when you are angry? He says biological signatures. The blood flows to the hands, the heart starts increasing in its rate, adrenaline generates energy for strong action. Now, these 8 emotions are very much part of our primary human being that we were, and they are the instincts which made us survive. So these are the ones that were, in fact, our skills of survival, our tools for survival. And these are still, maybe we have been now coated with our intelligent brain and mind, but they are still there acting in us. Sadness, for example, he talks about grief, sorrow, gloom, melancholy, self-pity. And what happens when you're sad? It drops, your energy drops. It slows the metabolism. It brings tears into your eyes. So he's talking about these actions or these feelings that promote emotionally, it causes in us certain actions. Fear, what happens when you're angry? Okay, anxiety, when you're afraid, anxiety, nervousness. But what happens in our biology? The blood goes to the skeletal muscles. We get white sometimes. Our heart starts beating. And you know, we are frozen. We can't take any action sometimes. It is flight or fight, you know. Enjoyment, happiness. What happens when you're happy? How does it this affect? And he explains also how these, so I'm going to, the chart is there, you can look at it. Love. You know, we always talk about love as, you know, romance and violin and music. But he says the feeling of love internally is a very positive feeling. And when you have that kind of a feeling, it's not only sexual pleasure, but rather in the agape or this mahabba that we talk about. It's a very strong feeling that makes you feel positive and act positive. Surprise. When you are surprised, things happen, you know. Sometimes your eyebrows go up, you know, because in the early man, the eyebrows were supposed to be the parapets to protect the eyes, you know. Disgust, your nose curls up when you pass next to garbage or something. And then shame, this feeling of guilt and shame and how it affects us. So these are the 8 emotions that are structuring our behavior. Now, when we go through these actions and we find that and we analyze ourselves, we are going to see how different people have different levels of these emotions acting on them. Some people could be by nature more fearful of things. Not that they are cowards, but they are more precautious maybe. So in fact, what makes them act in a way is very much by this temperament of fear. Others are, for example, impulsive or reckless. Others, you know, are a little bit more with this feeling of happiness, always optimistic and taking care of things in an optimistic way. So if we go back to these 8 things, he starts now taking all these, remember these 8 emotions, and then we come to what makes a leader. According to Daniel Goldman, and as I said, this was basically made for business, but it is also components of leadership. And then whenever you are thinking of assuming any kind of authority or duty, think about these. First of all, there are five important points that he wants us to remember, which are general and they can be applied anywhere. Even in the home, you know, if you want to make yourself the leader of your house, you know. Self-awareness. Self-awareness means I get to know myself. This is as old as Socrates. Know thyself. Know who you are. Go through make a SWOT analysis of yourself. Analyze your strengths and weaknesses and emotions and threats or risks, you know. And see, if I am by nature a very, very shy person, then maybe what I need to do to work on my leadership is to develop my shyness into a challenge and therefore be able to maybe fight it in such a way that I become the valedictorian of the class, you know, or something like that. So I have to be aware of what are my emotions. The second one is once I know my emotions, I try to regulate them. I try to work on them. I try to do the proper balance sheet of my emotions. Whatever needs a little bit more, I add on it. So this is very inter. These two first are me and me alone. The other three are me and others, they're intra. So we have motivation. What is it that motivates a human being to do an action? And he says it is to be something a bit more than money, and we'll go through each one separately. Empathy, and you know, from the very beginning of our courses, when we start with intercultural studies, we say these courses try to promote empathy. Empathy is not feeling positive with somebody, it's not sympathy, it's not feeling negative, it's not apathy, it's not indifference, which is antipathy, it's not neutral apathy, but it is putting my shoes into the place of another person and looking things from the other side. If I have empathy, then I understand why you behave in the way you behave. I don't have to agree with you, I don't have to imitate you, but I understand you. And if I understand you, then I do not condemn you or I do not criticize you. And if you're a boss and you understand, for example, what a mother is going through when she comes to work with a child at home, 40 fever, you empathize with her, you understand. You're not very strict on her that day. If a man comes to his job knowing that, for example, his parents are today, you know, in a very difficult situation, so it is good to have this empathy. So empathy and motivation, and the third is social skills. Do you have social skills? Do you know how to communicate with people? Do you have this ability of being firm, assertive, yet polite? Do you have that skill of transmitting what you want to say in a gentle way, in a firm way? So all of these. So these are the 5 important components: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skills. So let's go a little bit into, there's a chart which I have put it for you on the PowerPoint as well, on the slides. So what is the definition of self-awareness? The ability to recognize and understand your moods, your emotions, as well as their effect on others. So it's not only what you are, but how do you affect others? What are the hallmarks? What are the outward signs of this? Self-confidence, the artistic self-assessment, and then a self-deprecating sense of humor. You know, people, sometimes they hit you, what we say, hit below the belt, you know. What they do is they find you have a handicap and they keep on attacking you on that. They bully you. Now, if you're a person who knows what is your weakness and you start making fun of it in front of others, you say, you know, I'm a stammering person and they chose me to be the best, you know, speakerine on television this week, you are in fact absorbing their shock. You become like, you know, a shock absorbent, and therefore they stop making these remarks at you. Self-regulation, to be able to control these. And therefore, it goes on saying you are open to change. You are capable of changing and accepting other people's comments. You are balancing between one passion and the other. Motivation, a passion to work for reasons that go beyond money or status. This inside drive that keeps you working and completing the work and doing additional work. Strong drive to achieve. Optimism is always one of the things that is part of this leadership character. Empathy, as we mentioned, this cross-cultural sensitivity, and especially if you are in Lebanon, you need to have tolerance towards all the religions, towards all the denominations. You may not have to agree, but you have to accept. If you wondered what happened, the power cut and comes back. And finally, the social skill. Social skill is this proficiency in managing relationships. And this is how you build bridges with people, this is how you build confidence with people, and how you get to win them over. Now, I have given you these in lots of details, and we can look at this and analyze them in class. However, one thing we need to remember that Daniel Goldman thinks that emotional intelligence can be taught. And in fact, if we start doing this from very early kindergarten, first of all, we have to educate the teachers about this emotional intelligence, and then we have to practice it as early as kindergarten. It's not because a student is restless in class that that student needs to be isolated or removed from the classroom, or maybe if that student cannot follow math but is excellent in drawing. Everyone has a place where one excels, and it is important that we find these areas of excellence. People who are not confined in the normal boxes. Today is Lebanese Day for children with special needs. And sometimes we don't understand these children because some of them are not slow, but they're too fast for us, too fast for teachers who don't know how to cope with them. And sometimes we label them as handicapped, but it is we who are handicapped because we don't know how to deal with these children. So it is important that we understand well, and therefore Daniel Goldman says that this can be taught. People can be educated. And therefore, one of the things that I will do with you once we finish this discussion is to have an emotional intelligence test. We'll do it together. It is not to be graded, but it is to see whether we have been disciplined to be too logical, doing always the right thing, always what is expected by the book, and whether sometimes we have lost our instinctive survival kit, our emotions. And once we do that, it will be fun. It will be the last class that we'll do together. And we will go over this discussion together. So if you want to be a leader, remember, be aware of who you are, get to know your roadmap of passions or feelings, control yourself, regulate yourself, put them all in a proper balance, and then be motivated, have empathy, and have social skills. And then I guarantee you, you will succeed in whatever you do. Thank you.